Now we have Senator Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to each of you for your service and for being here today. Commissioner Christie, I'd like to start with you, if that's all right. I want to talk about permitting reform. This is a topic that's finally become sexy, popular to people on both sides of the aisle, and not a moment too soon. It's gaining some traction, and with good reason. It is encouraging that there is a growing consensus that we need to update our regulations so that we can produce more energy in America and rely less on other countries that have lower environmental standards than we do, and also be in a position to supply more natural gas to other countries that rely on much dirtier forms of electric power generation. But unfortunately, some harmful ideas have made their way into the mix. And some of those ideas would increase consumer costs without providing any benefits. Now, one of those ideas involves spreading the cost of large transmission lines among and between a larger group of electricity ratepayers, of customers. This idea, according to those proposing it, is necessary because it would make it easier for them to build large, long-distance lines to deliver wind and solar power to places like California that suffer frequent power shortages directly attributable to their short-sighted, aggressive, radical climate change policies. Now, in my opinion, it's simply not fair to force ratepayers in states like Utah or Idaho or Wyoming to pay for and otherwise shoulder the burden associated with the costs of the California and the Oregon climate policies. So, Commissioner, should Congress be in the position of socializing the costs of large transmission lines to customers who will never benefit from those lines?
Well, focus on the transmission instead of the permitting. First of all, I think they're separate issues. I think permitting is a legal authority to move forward with the construction, and we have huge problems with court reviews on that, as we all know. On transmission, I think that a transmission line that would not be built but for the public policies of a state or state, the cost should be allocated to the state or state that wants to move forward with the public policy projects. There are really three buckets of projects of transmission. The first is our reliability projects, and I think everybody agrees reliability projects need to be built, absolutely. Economic projects are where you solve more congestion costs with a transmission line, and everybody generally agrees you need to build those. The public policy-driven projects are projects that are built, but would not be built but for, and they're primarily state policies. And so if the state policies are driving the projects, and classic example is New Jersey's offshore wind, which is driven purely by New Jersey's policies, then I think most people would say that you shouldn't allocate the cost of New Jersey's policy-driven projects to, for example, in PJM, to consumers in West Virginia. And that's the fundamental principle of let the states that want the policy-driven projects allocate the costs among themselves.
Thank you. That's helpful. Commissioner Danley, let's turn to you. As you're well aware, FERC has a pretty well-defined mission, and it's a mission that the Supreme Court described back in 1976 as involving a job to, quote, encourage the orderly development of plentiful supplies of electricity and natural gas at just and reasonable rates. I've noticed that in recent years, in the last two and a half years in particular, we've seen the Commission starting to stray from that mission. And while I'm pleased that there's been some progress over the last few months toward reversing that disturbing trend, I remain very concerned about the lingering uncertainty that's there, uncertainty that's been contributed to by past FERC decisions, especially those in the last 2 years, that have a tendency to stifle investment in natural gas pipelines and electricity transmission projects. What should FERC be doing, in your view, to provide more certainty to project investors making risk assessments?
Senator, you are quite correct to be concerned about the regulatory uncertainty. FERC is, at its core, a rate-making agency, and what we should do is make our rate decisions as clear as possible. When tariffs are approved, we need to enforce the terms of the tariff. One of the worst things that the Commission does is constantly grant illegal retroactive waivers to do things like jump queue positions or have deadlines that are relied upon to manage queue processing. We need to have clear and firm rules, and we need to apply them, and we need to set the circumstances of clarity and regulatory certainty that allows a rational allocation of capital. Because the risk premiums now, given the uncertainty regulatorily, are so great that they're stultifying investment in critical infrastructure.
I've got additional questions. We've got a lot of members here, and so I'm not going to take more time. As my time has expired, I'll submit those for the record. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Senator.